Ben Greenwald, and today I'm going to be talking about why the gender gap at colleges is not a significant problem. My first point is that even with the gender gap, there will still be mixed gender interactions because people know people outside of school. And also students, during events, students will bring friends of the opposite sex to these events. Because there's not going to be an event that's just all women or all men at a school. This doesn't happen. My second point is that the gender gap is not a significant gap, especially when compared to the last 40 years. As of 2008, the percentage of male students has leveled off at around 46, and this means that there's 46/54, and which is a much smaller gap than in 1960, when only 35% of students in earning degrees were female. And these colleges managed to have all their events and functions and everything else just fine. And our response to claim 2, that you do not get a full college experience when there's a gender gap, is you can still get a full college experience no matter how many students, how big the gender gap is. In the 50s and 60s, there was almost completely male students in some schools, and they managed just fine. And according to the definition of a full college experience is subjective, and it's possible to get one. It depends on your taste. And there are also more clubs now at universities, including clubs that weren't allowed 40 years ago, started by minorities, and colleges now have co-ed dorm rooms, and there's a much more even ratio of men and women in math and science classes than there have been in years past. And also, as far as sports programs are concerned, according to collegesportssponsorships.com, sports programs are being cut predominantly due to budget problems, not due to a decrease in the number of male students. The only programs that are getting cut are programs that don't make money for the school, like college wrestling. And in response to claim 3 that men are uninterested in attending traditional universities, again, there's 46% of university students are male, according to the American Council for Education. And in response to the claim that males are often more attracted to technical schools, many students who attend technical schools are students who either cannot afford to go to a 4-year college, or do not have the grades to go there, or have no high school diploma. And according to the New York Times article from this year, men are still getting more grad and post-grad degrees than women, especially in science and math. And men also outnumber women in Ivy League schools, as they always have. gap is not a significant factor in our school system.
All right, well, you ID the topic that you're responding to, but the first of the supporting claims is not really explained. You've got a good explanation that there is, a counterclaim that you're developing, and I understand the point of view that you're taking here. There's also some discussion about what the criteria ought to be in evaluating these things. That comes up, I think, a little bit later when you're talking about the full college experience on the second point. Your delivery is a little low-key. I'm not sure if you've got a cold or if you're just really mellow. But, I think you need a little bit more energy. The hands in the pocket thing, looking down quite a bit, that undermines the confidence that people are going to have in you. You need to work on your ethos a little bit. I thought there were a couple of places where you had some good counterclaims. The second point was much more clearly signposted when you responded to it, and so it was a lot easier to follow on that particular point. When you got to the third point, it sounded to me like you were going on the sports issue, and the first question that came into my mind was, well, is this the third point? And then as soon as you got off of that, then it sounded like you were getting into a third point. I thought you had very good evidence on your own, but there's not really any discussion of the advocate's evidence or reasoning. It's just like you've developed your own argument on the opposite side here without considering whether or not the advocate's information is relevant. The one place where I thought you had a pretty good comparison, though, was on the gender gap issue versus 1960 to the present day, and how the gender gap issue is just reversed in this situation. But what's the challenge on the advocate to show, for instance, that there was some harm during that time period when there was a disproportionate representation of men as opposed to women? And I think that would have been a good challenge to make on a lot of those points that the advocate brought up, but I didn't hear much of that. Like I said, it seemed more like you were developing your own issues instead of discussing the issues that the advocate brought up. Okay, thank you.